Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
Salāmun Alaykum, everyone. So, Masha Allah, with the blessing of God, we are here to attend another Quran study, and it's absolutely a blessing from God that we're here to attend. There's nothing good in our heart, and we should be grateful to God for all the blessings and to pray to God that to increase our knowledge so we can understand your book more and more and clearly. So, inshallah, we'll be starting from the verse number 83 and surah number 37. And the subheading is Ibrahim. I seek refuge in God from Satan, the rejected, in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. So, verse 83, among his followers was Abraham. He came to his Lord wholeheartedly. He said to his father and his people, what are you worshipping? Is these fabricated gods instead of God that you want? What do you think of the Lord of the universe? So one of the things that I've been noticing, and it's just my personal understanding, and can correct me if I'm wrong in that. See, these tenses that God is using was, and we see in different forms in different areas where God is using is and was, and that put a more clear picture. Is it God talking about this world or the hereafter? So as we go along, we will like show more of these signs. Like the previous verse 81 says, if this was about Noah, that he is one of the believing servant because he is alive, he living in God's kingdom, so he is a believing servant. And here we see he was follower. So when Abraham was on earth, he was following God. So he was a follower, which put him in the past tense. So and then there'll be more signs, inshallah. So God is using Abraham as like a you know like a ruler, like in he's a standard of you can call him. But to be very very careful, we don't cross that line of not making any distinguish between messengers. As we will read about Abraham and how devoted he was, not to put one prophet or messenger above or other, but we just can be, we can read and we can understand and we can learn from his story to apply it on our life. That is the most critical part. Then we read any prophets, but like Abraham did such a, he went through such a hard, tough test, and so that we don't cross that fine line of putting one and above another, something like that. For us, it's God's commandment to treat each same way. So he came to his Lord wholeheartedly. So he was a follower of God, and how can somebody can come wholeheartedly? And that is something to understand, that you cannot get involved in something unless you understand that. Like for example, if you don't know anything about baseball, and but it's in your gene that you will love this game, and if I take you to a game, you will not understand until you start learning about the game, and then you will become a big fan of the game. You will not even miss one game. But in the same way, some people love different games, different things, different hobbies and stuff. So when they find out about that hobby, or what's inside their God has put it, what talent God has put in them, because not everybody likes to be a doctor, nobody likes to be a teacher, or it is what we love. Then when we discover ourselves, that's when we oh, I did that's what I want to do the rest of my life, or this is what I want to do. So wholeheartedly to coming to God, and this specific quality God has put in every human being. Be born with instinct in our heart that there is only one God, and the love of God is already in our heart. This unlike like some specific hobbies, this thing is put God has put in everyone. We just need to dig it out and find out ourselves and our situation, and everyone. This is the system that we will find wholeheartedly coming to God. So and we will learn more about what he went through. So here is this young man. He was like a youth at that time. I mean, such a young man, and he started analyzing the community that he was born in. They were worshiping these idols, and he saw that you are. He's telling his people that, what are you worshiping? I mean, that doesn't make any sense to him. Is these fabricated gods instead of God that you want? Like like basically he's telling them, put your thinking cap on. Come on, these gods, you think they created you, and now you carved them, and now you're worshiping them. That they will protect you, they will give you something. That's what it is? Uh, just a very common sense thing. And then he introduced the concept of one God. What do you think of Lord of the universe? And this is very brave to call these fabricated gods. That's a very brave. I mean, today's age, if you call somebody's god as fabricated god, they will get so upset. I mean, any religion pretty much. But he was so devoted. I mean, when you're devoted to God and believe in God, God will take fear out of your heart. And he's calling his people that, is that what you're doing? You fabricate these gods and you worship them? This very, very common problem. And one thing to mention is that why God told us, like Abraham's critical part of his life, where he was searching for planet, he saw a shining star, shining planet, star and sun, and then when they went away, he said, "I am tired of this." And how each step he took to breaking the idols and putting him in fire. God could have told us a small story that there was a man named Abraham. We made him a prophet and we gave him a book. He went to his people. They rejected him, and that's it. And they would try to put him in the fire. We saved him. But if you pay attention to this critical part of the story, that is really learning like stepstones for us to ponder upon. And then let's go to the next part of this. Um, One thing I want to mention is that like we are like screaming in our mind. What does that mean? Is when we look at the story of Abraham and how these people were acting, and when we read it, we say like we're literally saying, "What's wrong with you guys? Don't you see? I mean, how can these look at when Abraham broke your idols? They could not protect themselves. They could not harm Abraham when he was breaking them. When you put them in fire, God saved him. I mean, all these and plus more signs, and we are like telling these people, what's wrong with you? And similarly with Moses, when he was giving them all those proofs, and we are screaming at them, what's wrong with you? Because it was, this situation was personal to them, because they were in it. They were attached to their ancestors. It was a family gathering and love and all that. They were sincere to death. So they were in that situation. So they see that situation differently. We see it differently. We are outsiders. When we look at their situation, we are not personal to their ancestor. So we analyze the situation the way it is. But them, it was very different. They're emotionally involved in it. Even today's, if suppose there was a book. I mean, we know that Quran is the last book. Suppose like 500 years later, it was there another book to come, suppose another prophet. What would you find in that book? You will find in that book, God is mentioning, we send their brother Rashad to their community with clear proofs of miracle of 19. And we preach them, I don't want any wage from you. I don't want anything from you. I'm here to just preach to you that your God is one God, and you shall not mention anybody in your contact prayers. You should devote yourself to God alone, and this is where the happiness is. But subsequently, they rejected him, and retribution came to them fast. This is what you will find. It's very similar, because this is what we've been finding in the previous scriptures from Quran and whatever happened before. And those people, like suppose 500 years ago, I mean, in the future, and these people got a book and they're reading about our life. You know what they will be doing? Exactly this statement. They were like screaming in their mind. They were saying that, what's wrong with you guys? You have a messenger with the very clear proofs, proving through the Quran 381 and verse 37, and plus miracle of 19 and so much. What's wrong with you guys? They'll be screaming at us exact way that we are screaming at them. God says that God's system never changes. Is the story is repeating itself again. And God wants us to use our thinking cap on. That's why God is telling us about Abraham, how he uses logic, and God has given us brain. God has made us smart. God did not make us dumb. We analyze. We don't make stupid decision every day. We look at every life situation and we act accordingly. We don't go and stand in the middle of the road. We know that it's dangerous. And similarly, we don't. When we work, we are sincere at our work. We know that we make mistakes. There's going to be consequences. When we are driving, you know, we follow the rules, and hopefully everyone is doing it. So and especially when the policeman is standing there, we definitely don't want to break. People don't break law because we know the consequences. We use our mind and logic. But when it comes to religion, it's the complete opposite. And what happens? God has given us brain, and He wants us to use it. But when somebody refuses to use it, they blindly accept what is given to them. What happens? It's like God is saying, "Okay, I gave you brain. You don't want to use it? Fine, turn it off. You don't want to use it." And their works become a door in their life, and whatever they're doing, that's what becomes us. And this is God is saying over and over in the Quran, over and over. And another thing very important I want to mention is that we've been taught from the beginning only Muslims goes to heaven. This is very critical in Muslim. I mean, this is not only in Islam; it's in every religion. That's what they preach. Only your religion is the right way. In other words, so as a child, I used to think that there's like 7 billion people in the planet and 1.5 is Muslim. What about the suppose 6 billion non-Muslims? What will happen to them? I mean, is it my free ticket to heaven that I was born in Islam and I'm going to go to heaven and that's it, without doing anything? Or like this thing, if you in Mecca, you do one prayer is like equal to 100,000 prayers. So I used to ask God question that I am born in a regular community. I'm not born in Mecca. So, I mean, I have to pray 100,000 times to be equal to somebody who was luckily born in Mecca, and he will get one prayer and he's equal to 100,000. That doesn't make any sense. Similarly, when Abraham was asking questions, that doesn't make really sense that what this community was doing for all these things. Like, what do you think that you're born in a Muslim community that you have free ticket to go to heaven? No, we are exactly in any religion how it corrupts over time. Similarly, Islam is corrupted over so many years, and you have to sit down and dig down analyze the situation, just like Abraham did, to sort out what is wrong, and everything is pretty much straightforward, common sense, and you come out with understanding of your religion, and that's why you can come out with your heart to accept God or not. So don't be living in this land where this you just whatever is told is it God has given you a powerful brain and use it. And verse 88 says, he looked carefully at the stars, then he gave up and said, I am tired of this. Then they turned away from him. He then turned on their idols, saying, would you like to eat? Why do you not speak? He then destroyed them. So here, Abraham, when he's arguing, talking to his community, his father, he looks at stars, and that in Surah 6, he says he looked at a shining star, a moon, moon at night, and sun. So when they went away, and he said, I am tired of this. And he's been arguing with these people, and they don't want to listen. And he's been telling them to worship only God, the Lord of the universe. And they've been arguing back and forth. And he said, then they said, then he gave up and said, I am tired of this. And they turned away from him. So in pretty much the situation that they were maybe in a place where there were their idols were present. So and I'm sorry. So they turn away. They left Abraham standing there. So he's standing there. He's been arguing for them for so long about worshiping God alone and giving them signs and this. Look at the stars, look at the moon, and this and that. And so he turned towards the idol. Just imagine the magnitude of this situation. Just imagine you have in your brain that there's this like temple set up area and there's a big giant statue standing there. He looks at them. Would you like to eat? He's offering them some food. And then he asked them, why do you not speak? I mean, it's a very graphic picture. If you just imagine just a youth talking. I mean, he's such an emotional devotee to God, and he's talking to these giant, and then he destroyed them. He then destroyed them for a very specific purpose, because he left one big one standing to wake up these people to analyze that. Let's go to the next one then. Okay. So what happens then is verse number 94. They went to him in a great rage. He said, "How can you worship that you carve, when God has created you and everything you make?" They said, "Let us build a great fire and throw him into it." So when Ibrahim was calling the fabricated gods and this and that, and when he destroyed them, the moment he was destroying, he knew what would happen. Just imagine today when somebody even make a picture of prophet, how people get upset. So when he was doing that, he's destroying their idols. He knew what the consequences would be, and the consequences would be very severe. But he took such a brave act. I mean, this was amazing. That so he knew that he already knew that they will come in a great rage, not just oh, why did you do that? We will build it, or they were angry. They were really furious. I mean, great rage. And this, and then in the response, and like imagine somebody's yelling at you, screaming. In the response, he says, "How can you worship what you carve?" Like he's trying to wake up them up. Their thinking cap on, like when I was breaking them, they couldn't protect themselves. Even though the big one that is standing, he couldn't protect any of them. So do you think they can do anything to you? And when he's telling them God has created you and everything, again he's trying to wake them up. Like, think about it. And they were just not threatening Abraham, like, oh, we will do this to you. They actually built a great fire, not just some logs and put some fire and they're going to throw him. This was a great fire, which probably, and fire is burning in a big massive area, then you can't even go close to it. Like if you ever, like if there's a fire, sometimes there are fire in mountains and stuff like that, and you can't even go close to it. It's the heat is just coming from this. You have to be standing so far away. You can't even go close to it. So for them to even throw Abraham, they would have to use something to throw him into the fire. It was that kind of. So when they built a great fire, that means they were really, really upset, because they were so devoted to their gods. And when they saw their God hurt and broken, in their mind, they're probably thinking that that they were using respect to their gods. That, don't worry, we will take care of you. We're gonna punish Abraham, this and that. In their mind, they're being devoted to their gods and respecting them in that way, that we did took action or building this great fire. Similarly, today, when somebody does any action based on religion, that's what they're doing. They're basically trying to prove their point and their sincerity, and their sincerity was with these gods. So let's get to the next verse. So, and God says, they schemed against him, but we made them the losers. He said, I am going to my Lord. He will guide me. My Lord, grant me righteous children. We gave him good news of a good child. So God is telling us, these people, that was their scheme against Abraham. That they wanted to punish him. They want to completely wipe him off the planet, like burning him. But God made them losers. How God made them losers is, imagine that, when God is just not telling a story of Abraham. When he broke the idol and then he says, ask the big one. I mean, at that time they were taken back, and God wrote that in Surah 21, that verse, that they were taken back, meaning that at that time they were shaken up of, wow, he is, something that he's saying is right. That makes sense. It's just putting two and two together. But then at that time they were taken back, because they went back to their whatever they were doing. At that time, if they would have stopped and they said, wow, yeah, Abraham makes sense. Let's devote ourselves to God alone. But they went back to their own. I think I'm getting a feedback on the mic. So they went back. So then when They were putting him in the fire. Just imagine, I think it's my understanding that they can see Abraham well and alive in the fire. At least at that time, they should have thought that our God couldn't even protect themselves. Here, Abraham, his God is protecting him in the fire. And where our God could not even protect themselves, what can they do for us? So that's why we need to realize that how bad the ego can get when you are uh, when you made your mind to do what you want to do, then there's no hope left. If you don't want to examine the situation which is presented, if it is a court and after getting all the proofs, and if you still make the wrong judgment, if you're a judge and you make the wrong judgment, then what can anybody do? All the proofs are presented. He just simply said, I'm going to my Lord and he will guide me. He just put his whole trust. Then he says, my Lord, grant me righteous children. Um, that he lost his community, Abraham. He loved his father. He lost his father. His father actually threatened him that I will stone you to death. So he pretty much lost everybody. So his hope is at least, that he wants his offspring, his children, to be righteous. So that's what he's praying, that at least I don't have anybody. He just uh, from his children, he wants a family. And God says we gave him a good news, and that was about Ismail, that he was born. And then because imagine, and Abraham was, God tells us that he was in Surah 75. God says that Abraham was clement, extremely kind and obedient. So this is the quality of Abraham. So just to give you a heads up for this next verse. So it's a satanic dream. When he grew enough to work with him, he said, my son, I see in a dream that I am sacrificing you. What do you think? He said, oh, my father, do what you are commanded to do. You will find me, God willing, patient. They both submitted, and he put his forehead down to sacrifice him. And then there's explanation of the verse 1 or 2 is it says, the most merciful never advocates evil. As with Job, Satan claimed that Abraham loved his son too much and was permitted to put Abraham to the severe test. So here's the when Ismail was grew enough to work with him, like probably maybe I don't know how old, when a child can work with his father, he was in that age. So which means that has enough understanding of life things around him. He was not like a toddler or something. He understand what's going on. Like when his dad tells him something, do he like do he's in that age where he can understand. And so all of a sudden Abraham sees a dream where he's sacrificing his son. So he thinks at that time this dream probably is like a message for him, that we gave you a son or something like that, and you have to sacrifice back to God. That's what he probably thought. That's why he shares his dream. I don't want to put some words in for my, but this is like sort of understanding that he took the dream seriously. That is like a command or something. He believed in the dream. God is going to mention the next verses. And look at his son. He was so righteous and obedient son, and he's also, God made him, I think, prophet. So what he's telling his dad, do what you are commanded to do. So another sign that they were taught that it was a command for them to do. And he said, imagine this is the magnitude of somebody to tell someone to sacrifice. I mean, this test is like the top of the, like if you have the levels of different tests, this is pretty much the maximum test somebody can get. There's nothing harder than that. I mean, nobody can even come close to this kind of test that the father and son went through. I mean, this is just can shake everybody. And he's saying, God willing, I'll be patient. So he said, inshallah, you'll find me patient. And this is so true, that this is we learn from the Quran that, and this is one of the attributes of God, is most merciful, most gracious. And we can understand someone who's most merciful will never advocate evil. And this is Abraham. Was one of the big prophets from the beginning. And so now we understand, because the scriptures have been coming. He was living in a community where the people doing idol worship and all that. So now we understand God is telling us that most merciful will never advocate evil. This is plain simple. So this dream came from Satan, and God allowed that to happen because just like Solomon, when he missed one prayer, he didn't want the Satan to claim on the day of resurrection that Solomon loved horses more than God, so he let everything go. Similarly, when Satan could say to God that, oh, Abraham loved his son too much, and so God allowed this to happen. Okay, fine. If you think that this is the situation, go ahead, put him to test. And God put Abraham to such a severe test, and they both submitted, and he put his forehead to down to sacrifice. So if you put this situation all together, like Pharaoh, you can expect Pharaoh like he was killing the children, the kid newborns, right? So you can understand his behavior. Somebody who's a serial killer, or somebody who's who you can expect something from that, does not make you okay. Yeah, this person is capable of something. Doesn't make you move. But somebody who's Kaliman, extremely kind and obedient, a person like that, to go through this step of sacrificing his own son, it's a big deal. Like if a very nice person uses bad language, it will shock everyone. Like, really, did he say that? I mean, because we don't expect something, and to expect something from Abraham like that, it was something like, wow, that that's mean he loved his God more than anything. I mean, it just changed the whole situation. And just imagine when they were walking both towards the place of sacrifice. When they were walking, just imagine. How when people do idol worship and people call the Son of God and this and that, how the sky and God gives example that they shatter with fear. Uh, they're scared. But when such an obedient person was walking towards sacrifice, imagine the sky and earth, and what would they be thinking? Wow. I mean, they would be, who is this man? How can somebody do that? I mean, what a symbol of obedience he was. Again, to clarify that we should not make any distinction about any messengers and prophet, but to inspire from his story is marvelous. Like, what a devotion, absolutely devotion to God. No wonder why God called him his beloved friend. And as people call other prophets as beloved, but God does not use this word for anybody else except for Abraham. And verse 104, we call, and the subheading says, God intervenes to save Abraham and Ismail. We call him, O Abraham, you have believed the dream. We thus reward the righteous. That was an exacting test indeed. We ransom Ismail by submitting an animal sacrifice. So after this was over, when they were doing it, he probably heard God's voice, "Oh, Abraham, that you did believe, you believe your dream. He is righteous, the Lord, the righteous." So this is pretty much the God system. If you believe and you're righteous, God will reward you. And this was an exacting test. Sort of if this is like a world record in test, this is beyond the limits of anything that nobody can even come close. Exacting test, one of the tough tests for anyone to go through. And then what God did when they put him down for, when Abraham put Ismail down for sacrifice, God substituted an animal. So when they saw, we heard from other stories like Abraham put like some scarf on his face and eyes so they don't want to see it. And when he removes, I mean, these, I don't know how validated these are, but when he saw, actually, I mean, he could have closed his eyes or something. When he opened his eyes or something, when he saw his son was standing there and there was like a sheep was sacrificed, something like that. So that God house saved him. And to show Satan, look, this was your proof. And how embarrassing would that be for Satan that to claim and then God proved him wrong. And imagine how disrespectful that was. To claim all that from Satan, and to tell Satan that look at this human being, how obedient that is, and look, when I told you to obey me in the past, then you refused. You become arrogant. Yeah, I told you something simple to do, and then you become arrogant because your status and all that came in between. What a learning experience that is. And verse 108 says, "And we preserved his story for subsequent generations. Peace be upon Abraham. We thus reward the righteous. He is one of the believing servant." He is the believing servant. So he was followers in the past, in the beginning. God said he was, and he is. So definitely the believing is well. God, we know that righteous never die. He's up well in God's heaven, and he's a believing servant. He believed, um, and that's where you understand the tenses how they are put a story. So God says we, because his story was so important, God preserved it, like Moses and other stories of prophets, for subsequent generations. And why God did it? Because, for us to learn. That is it. To learn and understand how different prophets went to their communities and what was their reaction and what can we learn. This is the whole point about telling us a story, not to read it and earn, like read over and over, and I mean just not even paying attention and just thinking that I'm getting sawab and this and that good deeds. We need to understand what we read and learn from them and see where do I stand. And God is selling peace be upon, uh, like peace. It's actually like we say Salāmun Alaykum, Salāmun Ala Ibrahim. Like God is sending peace. God is saying Salāmun. Basically, God is saying Salāmun Alaykum to Ibrahim. We thus reward the righteous, and this is God's system. If you're righteous, this is God's unchangeable law that this will happen. If you're righteous, you will get reward. There's no ifs and buts. And he's the believing servant. So one of the things I just want to mention that I was just, this is my personal understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the tense why they're important is because, like for example, if somebody's an engineer or a doctor, you call this person, he is a doctor, he is an engineer. But when this person dies, you don't call this person he is an engineer. You say he was engineer. He was, because he's no longer alive. He's no longer a doctor or engineer, right? Similarly, God tells us, like in Surah 19, verse number 41, that mentions in the scripture Abraham, he was a saint, a prophet. Mentioned in the scripture Moses, he was devoted and he was a messenger and prophet. Similarly, in Surah 33, I think verse 40 something, 43 or something, where God says Muhammad's another father of your men or something like that. I'm just paraphrasing. And God said he was a messenger of God. So he was. And we can clearly see this, the people call that Muhammad is a messenger of God, that they use a present tense. So I mean, I did not find anywhere else where God is mentioning any prophet or messenger that they are still. And that's some sort of like question too for me to understand more of this concept, that when the messengers and prophet dies, so their messengership ends, their prophethood ends, is that it's only for a sign for this world. So calling somebody is a messenger is not chronic, right? And we can discuss that afterward. But we can see the people, they say, I bear witness that Muhammad is a messenger of God. This is the people that, like you see a typical mosque that they 5 times a day they spin they do the azan and they say Ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah, that we bear witness that he is a messenger of God, which we cannot find in the Quran anywhere. And another part is that we bear witness. How can somebody be bear witness to something? And we can see in Surah Munafiqun that people they say we bear witness. I mean, uh, so how can you bear witness something that you don't see? You have to be present. I mean, were you present when this prophethood was assigned to Prophet Muhammad, or messengership? We don't. We just believe in it because this is what God says we believe. But to say bear witness, we can only say Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, because we did bear witness. Verse 7, that God gathered us, all of us, and we took a shahada at that time. We bear witness, your Lord. I'm paraphrasing. So, and this is a very critical part to think and ponder upon the situation, and we don't say something that's not chronic thing. And then here's the second son for Prophet Ibrahim. Then we gave him the good news about the birth of Isaac to be one of the righteous prophet. We blessed him and Isaac among their descendants. Some are righteous and some are wicked transgressors. So when after he going through that severe test, God blessed him with another son. His name was Isaac. I think in Arabic Ishaq. and he was also a righteous prophet. So God blessed him with one prophet and another prophet, both his son, such a devoted people, and we blessed him and Isaac. And among their descendants, some are righteous and some are wicked transgressors. So this is the system. I think we learn in Surah number 2, Abraham is praying to God that the next coming generations and professing that to keep them righteous. God says, whoever believe and righteous, God will bless them. Something like that. I'm not understanding. But this is God's system. After a prophet comes, and what happens is those among their descendants, some are righteous and some are transgressors. I'm sorry, guys. Give me just a second. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. Excuse me, guys. Sure. So, I mean, we cannot just automatically think that if there's a prophet or messenger comes, and automatically everybody will be just following. Innovations creep up on us, and people start they're righteous people and they're wicked. The people they are wicked, of course, they transgress, and there are those who are sincere, they're righteous. God will guide them. This is plain simple. People are born in all kind of communities and things. And then verse 114, we also blessed Moses and Aaron. We delivered them and their people from the great disaster. We supported them until they became the winners. We gave both of them the profound scripture. We guided them in the right path. We preserved their history for subsequent generations. Peace be upon Moses and Aaron. We thus reward the righteous. Both of them were among our righteous servants. Again, the story of Moses and Aaron, where, I mean, same process, same process. People are disbelieving. Here, the prophet, the messenger comes with a proof, and people are wicked. They disobey. They don't believe. And what happens to them? And those who take heed and believe, and God become righteous, and God saves them. Very simple. So they delivered them, and because the people in Egypt, as we learned from previous surahs, from the great disaster, they were killing their sons and all those stuff that was going on. And God says we supported them until they became the winners. So God supports them. If you're righteous, basically this is God's system. God will support you until they become the winners. And we gave both of them profound scripture. So both were prophet, and they both got scripture because we learned that those who are prophet, they get a scripture. We guided them in the right path, and we preserve the history for subsequent generations. So basically, their history for coming generation, so they can learn and understand. When you read the story of some king, like Tipu Sultan and other people, like they did some marvels. Sometimes there's something that was brave, and something that their quotations you might learn. Similarly with God, why God tells us the story of these prophets and what happened to them is just for us to learn. That is the most important part. And God is also telling peace be upon Moses and Aaron, and like God is also saying Salãmun Alaykum unto them. We thus reward the righteous. Again, same from the previous verses we read, and both of them were among our righteous servants. So righteous is, basically is like, it's again puts in the right perspective that righteous, when you are in this world, you're going through the test, and you're a follower, you're righteous, you're obedient, and all these categories. Like when you are, obviously you're righteous after in heaven, but this really tells us that God is telling us about their story, that we made them, this history for people, and all that they were guided and all that. So they were righteous servants. They were like they were obeying God. The next one is Elias. Elias was one of the messenger. He said to his people, "Would you not work righteousness? Do you worship a statue instead of supreme creator, God? your Lord and the Lord of your forefathers. They disbelieved him. Consequently, they had to be called to account. Only God's servants who are absolutely devoted to him alone are saved. He preserved his history for subsequent generations. Peace be upon Elias and all those like Elias. We thus reward the righteous. He was one of our believing servant. Was believing servant, inshallah. So Elias was another God's not sure who's the messenger. Uh, so he said to his people, "Would you not work righteousness?" And they had the similar story with like Abraham. They had statues where they were worshiping, and he's telling the basically same thing that Abraham did. Instead of the supreme creator, put on your thinking cap on. Same process, just like with Abraham. We just went through. I don't want to repeat all that. Exact same steps. And God, your Lord, and your Lord of your forefathers. Same thing again. That common sense. Use your logic. God has given you a powerful brain to analyze. You don't make fool decisions when it comes to this worldly life. Why make the fool decisions about your most important part of where you know what's going to happen? We know we all gonna die. There is no one living beyond even like some people may live to 100 years, but let's go to 150 years. Nobody's crossed that limit, and we all gonna die. So what's gonna happen next? Either there's someone there or there's someone not there. Let's be serious about something that's most important. Just thinking cap on. And he's telling them these statues, what they're gonna do to you. And why don't you look at the heavens and the earth? All these, as with science and technology, we can see far more things in the space. And do you think that all this came from nothing? Science doesn't say that nothing something comes from nothing. Every action has a reaction. So how can these all defined laws of physics and science can be broken all of a sudden in that now what is the answer for even science too, that where is all this energy and mass, tremendous amount of mass in space, where this came from, all this uh, this is beyond our imagination to even I mean, it would be something like just typically with Abraham to just turn away from all this and turn off your thinking cap, and that's it. And you go and disbelieve him. Consequently, consequently, they had to be called to account. So when you disbelieve, there has to be an action and a reaction too from God. You cannot just disbelieve and then just walk away from this. Nothing happened. There's a price to pay. And as we read the previous verses, I mean, there's such a horrible picture that the tree of bitterness and all that. I mean, Quran is full of telling us all the signs and symptoms and what can expect and what lies ahead. Only God's servants who are absolutely devoted to Him alone are saved. This is the formula right here. We're absolutely devoted to Him. This is what you want to be doing to be saved. We preserve history, same thing for us to learn. And peace be upon Elias and like those Elias. You want to be like Elias? You want to be like them? It's just you can be. God has given you this body in your control. You can use it any way you want. You can be sincere to God or not. It's up to you. And if you do that, God will say Salãmun Alaykum to you. He does reward the righteous. He was one of the believing servants. So believe when he was believing in this world, and he was a servant. He was believing servant. Inshallah, I will stop here. I don't know if it took so much time, and let's talk about the question and comments. Inshallah, thank you.
Masha Allah. Thank you, Adam. Great study. Praise God.
Masha Allah, praise God.
Thank you, Adam.
Mashallah, thank you.
Excellent study. That was an excellent study. I appreciate that. I'm very intrigued about this whole idea of being a friend to God. That is a very intriguing part of the study that you brought up. I mean, it's one thing that we acknowledge God as our creator, provider, sustainer, redeemer, all of these things. But as a friend, I mean, that is really amazing to me that we could have that kind of a privilege or honor to come to him as a friend. Wonder if anybody would comment on that.
Yeah, I wanted to say that. So God says that people who grow their souls enough and who go to high heaven, they will be people who will be closest to God. So when you attain the rank of being closest to God, I mean, that means you're a friend, because friends are usually close to one another and they love each other, and so God loves the believers and they love God. And so when you get that close to God, of course, then you can call that person a friend. I mean, that's sort of like the definition of a friend.
Masha Allah.
Yeah, and God tells us also that God loves the righteous. God loves the charitable, and I mean, being loved by God is I would think that one of the biggest achievement one can get, that whoever God's love. So when you give the charity next time, like suppose what is in your mind, like we are so materialistic people, like we always numbers, numbers, numbers. And when you give charity, what is in the back of our mind, is thinking going on, I'm gonna get 700 times and I'm gonna get reward. This is how we human beings are. But instead, wouldn't you we should be focusing more that when I'm giving charity, God, for what? For to God to love me. And the reward, whatever 700%, that should be in the very back of our mind, and not even paying attention to. We should focus something far better reward than even 700 times, which is God loving you. And God loves a charitable. That's another way to think.
Also, Abraham, God tells us in the Quran that Abraham never was an idol worshiper. Even we know that before practicing submission, Prophet Muhammad was even an idol worshiper. So somebody at that young age having the awareness of God and supporting God and believing in him and trusting him, attained him the level of friendship with God, because imagine, his love was so high for God that even that satanic dream, he thought God is asking him to sacrifice his most something beloved, and a child which he gotten, at that time probably Ishmael was his only child, and he did not, he thought about it and he was ready to do that. So that kind of devotion and love for God and absolute trust in God, that if God is asking for this, um, how can I say, even how can I even hesitate? So getting ready for that kind of action requires like complete devotion and trust in God, even though God never asked him, but Satan gave him that idea. And look at the kind of test he passed. So those kind of devotion definitely earns a level of friendship with God, closeness to God, subhanallah.
Masha Allah. Actually, anytime I read about Abraham, I always ponder that if Abraham lived in the 21st century, people would think he's some sort of a terrorist or a madman, because just going into temple, and it wasn't even the Kaaba, and smashing the idols, um, it's like now you cannot even think of, even the traditional Muslim or submitter here, someone does that, smashing idols, they will think the person is like out of their mind.
Yeah, mashallah, very courageous, and at a young age even, as a youth, he was questioning, like, what are you people doing? The awareness of one Supreme Being was so much there. And verse 84 saying, he came to his Lord wholeheartedly. It's like his soul and his heart was just full of awareness of God and love of God. You know, his wholeheartedness is something to ponder upon, that how much wholeheartedly we are devoted, you know, so the level at what level Abraham was wholehearted, and God is acknowledging it here. That means he was absolutely devoted to God alone, absolutely, with all his heart and with everything he had. His examples given by God in the Quran are really something to, you know, even follow the religion of Abraham. That's why God chose him the first vanguard, you know, the first imam of submission. Like nobody else could perform submission to God alone before that had happened, or before Abraham. So God gives even Prophet Muhammad, then you follow the religion of Abraham and all of us. So it's not just what the practice is, like also follow his examples, you know. Masha Allah.
Robert, I hope I don't hear you in the news going and breaking some idols.
No, I was thinking just about that as well. I mean, imagine you're a youth, you're now going against your entire society, your entire family, everybody, and you're going to have the ball or the guts to come forward, sneak into that temple, destroy something that your whole society and culture is preeminent to them. You're going to go in there, destroy everything, and then you're going to have the wherewithal to put the axe in the hand of the largest idol, and then go back there and let it kind of fall where it's made. Can you imagine the chaos? Can you imagine the confusion of the people? And then, like it says in the Quran, they heard this youth and they were like, "Go get him! Go get this guy! We're gonna hold court right now, right here." And his guts, his determination to stand forth with God is just amazing. And then the consequences of that, they were to burn him, and they actually got to the point where they were going to throw him, or they did throw him in the fire. Now, at that point, you're going to be scared to death. I mean, you're there, and you could probably feel the heat, and then you're thrown in there, and you're like, "Oh my gosh!" And then you're in there, and you're like, "I'm not burning." The whole thing is just really amazing. But his relationship with God, being a friend of God, that is like totally intriguing to me. Totally intriguing, and I'm very happy that you all commented on all of that. And yeah, I do kind of wish I had the guts to go in and destroy some idols like that. Not there's plenty of them in our society, by the way. Thank you.
Yeah, Masha Allah. Oh, that his communications, what we see in the Quran is also like, you know, when even Abraham needed assurance from God to, you know, show him some kind of, even though he's been through so many miracles, praise God, that, and then God questioned him like, really, Abraham, do you even you need some kind of assurance? When God told him to mark the birds, and you know, the pieces of birds, and they came together. Is that what happened, right? Something like that.
You know, those birds, I don't know if any of you ever had the idea of actually going out there and trying that experiment, cutting the birds up, putting the pieces on there, and seeing if they'll fly back. Now, I've thought about that in my mind, and could you imagine what would happen if you did that and then they flew back? I mean, it's been like, ooh, it would be amazing.
Yeah, Masha.
Inshallah. So yeah, I also wanted to make a comment. I know we touched up on circumcision again last week, but I think these verses, do kind of bring back the discussion again, because these are very significant verses that mention Abraham's covenant with God, and how that is relevant here, because it says in verse 105 and 106, says, "You have believed the dream, we thus reward the righteous." That was an exacting test indeed, right? So it does say that, this was a test that Abraham was put through. Like many people I spoke with in the past, they didn't believe that it was a test because it was a satanic dream. But we know that any test that, for especially like admissions tests that people go through, they are put through because, Satan makes a claim also that, this person loves this thing more than God, so they're tested through this. And Satan says, well, if you put him through this thing, he's gonna fail, or if you put him through that thing, he's gonna fail. So he's tested through these subsequent tests, and this was a test also instituted for him, where he had this dream from Satan, because obviously God will never advocate such a thing. So as part of the test, God allowed this dream to happen to him so he could be tested. And and I wanted to mention two things here. One thing I wanted to mention was, I believe it's in Appendix 9. If we go to Appendix, I believe it is Appendix 9. Yeah, about Abraham, original messenger of Islam. If you see under if you see under the second paragraph, it says, God never ordered Abraham to sacrifice his son. It says, God is the most merciful. He never violates his own law. Any person who believes that the most merciful ordered Abraham to kill his son cannot possibly make it to heaven. Such evil thought about God is grossly blasphemous. Nowhere in the Quran do we see that God ordered Abraham to kill his son. So one thing right off the bat, that it shows that the grossness of having an evil thought about God, that God would advocate something. God never advocates sin, and for people to believe that God would advocate such a serious crime, just having that thought alone would disqualify anyone from entering into God's kingdom and entering into heaven. So that's very significant here. So when people believe that, in the same manner that God would authorize Abraham to perform circumcision, mutilation on children against their consent, or God wants that for other children, for that matter, by which a lot of kids will die, and they continue to die. I believe approximately 4 children die, 4 babies die every day just in the United States from circumcision, right? So just on that note, like, if you think that just having that thought that God would advocate such a thing, I think it kind of makes sense that these people will not make it to paradise, because they don't believe that God is merciful. And the other thing I wanted to mention also about that was that it says this was an exacting test indeed. And if you actually, the verses that the messenger of the covenant mentioned to describe the covenant of Abraham actually match very closely to the Quran. And God willing, I'll read part of that. This is this is what actually the messenger of the covenant actually quoted in his book, that the part that's been widely ignored by many of the people who uphold circumcision as a practice, unfortunately. And what the Messenger of the Covenant wrote here, I'm going to read it. And basically that shows that the Quran, the part of the Bible that actually confirms the Quran in this matter. And that's how the Messenger of the Covenant wrote it. It says the Bible does not now contain the Torah and the Gospel as they were. By the way, this was written in Appendix 19 of the first translation of the Quran that was later made obsolete. So this is no longer present in this appendix, in this Final Testament, the edition of the Final Testament. But you could still find it also in the other book, which the Messenger wrote about the mathematical miracle of the Quran, the computer speaks. So it says the Bible does not now contain the Torah and the Gospel as they were divinely revealed. Biblical scholars themselves have recognized the human nature and composition of the book. However, we may expect to find within its pages some portion of the Torah and the Gospel, although careful study is necessary in order to make the message comprehensible. An amazing feature of the Bible, even in its present form, is that it indicates the divine revelation would progress through a number of message bearers or prophets and be completed finally in one man or one particular prophet whose message would be so comprehensive and whose mission would be so universal that no further prophets would ever be needed. It is easy for God to speak with distinction of things thousands of years prior to their occurrence, but impossible for man to do so. According to the Old Testament, the faithfulness of Abraham was given special reward by a covenant or a promise to bless all mankind through his descendants. His line would be distinguished by divine guidance and prophecy. And it's quotes, in quotes, then double quotes, it's portion of the Genesis here. It says, "By myself have I sworn, saith the Lord, because thou hast done this thing, and hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, that in blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of the heaven, and as the sand which is upon the seashore. And in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast hearkened to my voice." So we can see here, first of all, that, of course, while he's mentioning the Bible and while he's mentioning Genesis 17, he's, clearly indicating that, many parts of the Genesis, obviously, or of the Bible itself, are tampered with. So we can only find within pages and within portions in those pages parts of the truth. And then he mentions that the it has been prophesied in the Bible that because Abraham passed this test, that God made the covenant with Abraham that he's going to have messengers from the progeny of Abraham all the way till the end of time. And the messenger was explaining that because Abraham has passed this test, as it states in the Bible, that God has made this promise to him that he will continue to send these messengers. So throughout the end of time, until the end of time, through his progeny. So we can see that all the messengers up until Muhammad, from Abraham, they were all from Abraham's progeny. There was Ishmael and Isaac, and the lineage of the prophethood came from them. So and that's really the end of it. And really everything else, like about circumcision or all that, was cut out, which in itself indicates that, one, it's not important, and two, it's not relevant, and two, it's tampered with, right? Because he cut it out. So this is the only portion that's mentioned. So really, I think when we talk about the test, it is a significant test, especially because imagine the reward that God is giving him, making a promise, which was an everlasting promise, that all the messengers and prophets were going to come from his progeny just because he passed this test. So.
Yeah, Masha Allah, God has made him as sort of like a, God give all the religious duties through him, and whatever he did was according to God's plan. I mean, God does not advocate us to go and break somebody's idol or anything. God, in fact, I don't know where God says in that you respect others, God, so they don't in their ignorance, they don't insult your God. So in that sense, we should not even insult somebody's God, right? And not to break any idol, because this all thing that Abraham did was just for a specific purpose, and to set a symbol for all of us. MashaAllah. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, so this was the idols that were broken. They were broken to illustrate a point. Nobody just goes in and breaks idols for the sake of it. I mean, we're not supposed to do that. Abraham never did that either, right? But he just was illustrating a point. And this brings me to the concept when we talk about, for example, backbiting or mocking and stuff. And this is not to say that either mocking or backbiting is okay, but sometimes people are unable to make a distinction. For example, if you are, let's say you make a cartoon or something or a joke, but it's really it really is actually not really meant to make fun of someone, but it's meant to illustrate the stupidity of a certain thing. Let's say like there is a cartoon that I see in the submitter's perspective that while the Messenger of the Covenant was the editor, he published this cartoon, and it was about the Saudis, and they were trading some serious commanders or something for that were prisoners of war for like a math tutor. And this was basically, on the surface, it looks like it's making fun of the mathematical abilities or intellectual abilities of the Arabs. But really, what it shows is that these people, what it proves is that these people are unable to understand the mathematical miracle of the Quran. And it illustrated that point, basically. So when you have things that are targeted as such, you cannot confuse that. Like you can't make a blanket rule, say, well, you shouldn't mock people, or if there's a problem and you're talking about it, people can not say, like, for example, you can't mention names of an organization or a person because you're backbiting. But we can see this similarly with the Messenger of the Covenant also, that and I'm sure there would be others, right? But you can see that he mentioned over and over in many perspectives and newsletters about religious preachers and scholars like Ahmad Didat and the Saudis and all these presidential, all the political leaders and stuff, but mostly like around scholars and religious organizations, and naming specific people of those organizations, and like also like celebrities. He talks about, for example, Eddie Murphy, Barbara Walters, and all these other people, like, and Rock Hudson and all these people, to illustrate certain points, like, about these celebrities. When he talks about them, he's talking about them. Obviously, those celebrities are not present, but he's making a point that these celebrities have all this wealth and everything, but yet they're admitting publicly that they don't have happiness in their lives. And then he's talking about people like Rock Hudson, who died a humiliating death because they chose a wrong lifestyle. Now, can we generalize in general by the rule of saying you cannot talk about a person behind their back if they're not, especially if they're not alive? I mean, that's something that comes up because a brother is dead. You can't talk about it. But you can't do that because he's illustrating a point. I mean, these are all lessons for us to learn from, that somebody who did not who made the wrong choices in life and sided with Satan eventually ends up having this horrible ending. So that should be a learning lesson for all of us to get from this, is that we shouldn't be like them, and this is a lesson for us. So that's not backbiting. And similarly with mocking, I mean, there's like several audios where I see the messenger there's one particular that I really enjoy is that where they're talking about all the different ways that these disbelievers will go to hell, on the day of judgment, and some will cold walk, and some will go under the fence and this and that, and everybody's laughing, but I've seen that in the past, people not here, but in other congregations, where people were very quick to just, the moment you said something and somebody laughed, they would like stop you and say you're mocking, and so we have to be wise. And I mean, it's one thing to know the verses of the Quran, but I think it's another thing to actually have the wisdom to understand, what that really means, and how to apply it. It's like, I mean, if somebody comes up to me and I think their hair might look funny or something, I'm not going to start ridiculing them over it. I mean, that's ridiculing to me, and mocking them. If, for let's say, somebody has a stutter or something like that, and I start mocking them, making fun of them. But when you're making a point of something to illustrate, the irony or something like that, to make a point, then that's really not ridiculing. And especially if the person's not even there. I mean, you're not hurting anybody by talking about this. It would be actually benefiting to other people, even that person, if the person was there to understand what they were doing was wrong, like. And same thing goes for the quote unquote backbiting thing. I mean, you can talk about problems, you can talk about issues, and if they involve certain individuals, you can refer to it if necessary, and that's completely in accordance with the Quran. So what I wanted to say.
So I'll bring up an example. I always run into this when I try to debate Christians on Jesus. I'm not insulting Jesus. I'm not, calling him names or anything. I'm just simply, well, a lot of times I'll point out his own words, where he says, why do you calleth thou me good? There's none good but one, that is God, worship God alone. I'll bring that up. And oftentimes in that conversation, it'll be brought up that I am insulting Jesus, that I am blaspheming against him, and all of these different things. And I really appreciate Solomon bringing this up. It seems as almost he's speaking to me on this, because I run into this constantly. And but yeah, I don't believe that I am backbiting when I'm telling the truth about Jesus not being God. But you run into that.
Yeah, same thing happens if you talk to traditional Muslims, and because they think we should be sending we should be commemorate,
Salutations.
yeah, towards Prophet Muhammad, and basically, how God says in the Quran, peace be upon um certain messengers, right? God can say peace be, because they are alive at God. God can say peace be upon them because they stood up for God. They completed their jobs, and those were difficult tasks, to bring the message, and they successfully completed it. So God is sending, peace, saying peace be upon them. But if our role is to just worship God alone, we can take the good examples. Of course, we acknowledge they were messengers, and obviously a human messenger would bring God's message to other humans. So we respect their role. Throughout the history, we God has given their example. This is how they did it. That acknowledgement. But other than that, uh, their mission and our mission is to worship God alone, and all praise belongs to God. We can acknowledge the good works by even Abraham, or like how devoted he was, but once again, we cannot fall into worshiping him, right? There is a fine line that you say, yes, I would love to be that kind of a worshiper. He did this at certain this time. But when you try to tell those two traditional Muslims that they actually are worshiping him, saying his name during prayers, day and night. There's something called Darood. That's basically sending, these their blessings to Prophet Muhammad and reciting it all day long. When you say that, they think we are blaspheming. We are against Prophet Muhammad. We don't like him. We hate him, or something like that. People like really don't see the point here that they did not create anything. They even bringing the message wasn't in their hands. It's God's guidance, God helping them through His angels to even deliver the message. And we, our whole focus should be on the message, not the messenger. Message and God. So, but there is they bring the third party in between, and it's like you can't even reach to God without having that third party in between and commemorating that party, and you know sending all your blessings to them, while God says they are unaware of what people are doing behind. Nothing reaches them. So, and eventually on the day of judgment, all of these idols are going to disown their followers or idolizers. Yeah, you're right. That how, you know, they think you were blaspheming. Yeah, same thing we face. Yeah.
So another aspect is, I was talking with the brother the other day. We were talking about, the broad category of human beings. And I said, well, you can break those down in the categories. You can break those down into disbelievers and believers. I'll say, forget about the believers for right now. We're just going to concentrate on the believers. The Quran says that the majority of believers, these are believers in God, fall into idol worship. And so this is so critical that I think we are addressing this in this study right now, because I think there's a tendency to think that once we cross over from being a mu'min to a Muslim to being a mu'min, that we somehow arrive, that we're safe. No, I think it's actually, that's when the real heat begins. That's when the real test begins. And I, for one, can't really feel that safe because of that one verse. It's talking about the majority of those who believe in God fall into idol worship. In my case, I have to kind of assume that that's me until I
Well,
can.
actually,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
actually, moment is a person who has reached certainty. So those are not people that will be idol worshippers, But believing in God doesn't make anyone a believer. A believer, like when Quran talks about a believer, quote unquote, it's talking about someone who has moved on beyond the point of being a submitter. Who have reached certainty, like they're absolutely certain, and they've reached a big level, great level of faith where they have no doubt absolutely whatsoever about God, the hereafter, and so but yeah, so technically speaking, a person who's a believer who has reached that status, only God knows, right, who those person or when they reach that status. But at that point, yeah, they're that means they're on the right path, and they're absolutely people who will be following the right path. But yeah, when people enter submission, or for doesn't matter how long they have been submitters, yeah, they still do, and they do, fall into idol worship, So, but they're, and a lot of them are not in the majority anyways, but then among the submitters, there are people who are in the majority who are falling into idol worship, so.
Yeah. So, Robert, it's what God is saying is that those who believe in God do not do so without um idol worship, right? These are like those who don't call themselves atheists, or like they're like completely they don't believe in anything, right? But those who believe, they say we believe in God, right? But they don't do it without uh, committing idol worship. So that's what God means. But when you reach certainty, you have no doubt about any of God's revelations, and you have passed your test, and you reach to that level. You absolutely, your life is aligned with the awareness of God, and you're completely, have no doubt about any of revelation in your in practical life, and your saying and your doings and everything, then you reach the level of moment, and only God knows who moments are, right? One might never know, like, am I moment or not? But the believers, when there is another verse where God says, if you ask them who created the heavens and the earth, they will say God. you know they believe, like common believer, whether it's Christian, Muslim, Jew, or Hindu, or any, everybody says we believe in God. But do they believe without committing idol worship? That's the category of those. And then of course, within those would be submitters too. you know Today's generation, a follower of a messenger of the covenant, would be, can become in the same category, until they reach the certainty level. So that's how I see that too. But inshallah, you don't have to worry. God willing, may God save us from any kind of idol worship and compromising our religion.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. Even like when you be, let's say, followers of people of this era, submitters, they might not fall into the common category of worshipping Muhammad, or you know or Rashad or something. But the idolatry comes in many shapes, like, for example, putting your opinion over and above God and his messengers. Like sometimes, I give you a small example, like even this circumcision issue. That is a form of idolatry, because that is a source other than Quran. That's also like we make anything, any religious practice outside of the Quran, and that is a form of idolatry. um, Money, children. So these subtle things, and in this era would be not blatant. Oh, I'm worshiping Muhammad, or my prayers are going towards Rashad or Muhammad, or it won't be like that. Every time is different story, because Satan has many tricks.
You're saying it's very subtle then.
Yeah, it would be more subtle, in subtle ways, like in this time. It's not going to be how exactly traditional Muslims do. For submitters, it would be other things, right? For example, circumcision issue. They brought an old sunnah of Abraham. We know that we won't be following hadith and sunnah of Prophet Muhammad, but there was this one lurking older sunnah hanging there, and they made it a law outside the Quran, while Solomon was just explaining that God never contradicts his own laws, that there is no hardship in religion. And in the previous study, he was explaining, imagine a 99-year-old man sitting, as soon as he becomes Muslim, he has to cut his, genitals, and chase other servants, and who might and might not be believers, to it's like presenting a sacrifice right away to God. And there is no, like in Genesis 17, there is no rationale even mentioned there, like why you have to do it. Like these people have made so many interpretations. Oh, it's for the cleanliness, or it's for the hygiene, or it's for the, you get less diseases, and all that. But there's nothing left. Whatever God has talked about contaminated meat um, in the Quran, that's not good for your health. Then also eat from the good things. And if this was related to health issue, God would have explained. Why would God leave it like, then it means it's like you're presenting a sacrifice? There's no nonsense in religion. Everything comes with a very, very rational, intelligent mind would accept it. God just did not prohibit any meat which could have been a good thing. We know that the gourd or dead animals are right away they catch bacteria and it's really bad for you. Meat of the pig is contaminated, and God described it. Otherwise, like blind faith, like just because God says so, I'm gonna do it. God explains everything. God says fully detailed. There every kind of detail in the Quran. Why would not be any kind of not only mentioning, no detail? You know, for example, there's not the details are not mentioned for the contact prayers, but contact prayer is mentioned, and we know that it has not changed within the Muslim community. All the units were there. How bowing and prostrating is mentioned in the Quran, and the how we do it was being practiced, so that God did not have to change that. But still, salat and zakat is mentioned over and over. So something which never got mentioned, never its detail, no rationale. How could that be part of religion? Simple. Thank you.
Masha Allah, Sister Najat. In addition, it also violates the Quranic verses where God says He designed you and designed you well, and there's so much verses about that.
Exactly. Yeah. And actually, there's so much goes against it. So much.
Okay, so now the issue becomes that we have this problem in the submitter community, and it seems to be a point of division, rightly so. How do we handle this? Do we can we still be brothers and sisters with them if they don't advocate and push it in our face? Can we respect them for their opinion, and can we respect us for ours? And can we is it, or do we just have to break with these people?
Well, God says that those who break their religion into sects, they do not belong with you. So I mean, of course, you can invite these people, but if they choose the other way, then and they choose to follow Satan, then to and then they call you idol worshippers, then to them is their religion, and to use your religion. Uh, I mean, if they care to discuss with you and they're open-minded and want to talk to you about it, then you can continue to talk to them. And that's how I see it.
How about if we agree to disagree? Can we still come together maybe in the Juma prayer, or no, we just got to kind of hash this out because it's just too important to let stand there without addressing it like you are pretty forcefully and firmly.
Well, I mean, the thing is, God says in the Quran, who are more evil than those who fabricate lies and attribute them to God. So, I mean, you have to see it for what it is, I mean, it's not about being together, like that's not the purpose of our existence is to, form like a club or anything like that. So, I mean, of course, if they choose to follow Satan, then I mean, you can't be brothers and sisters with people like that. I mean, who are advocating or fabricating lies to God, who are blaspheming. So I wouldn't be want to be that person. And I mean, of course, you can look at it as I mean, it's not you who's dividing, it's them who are changing the religion and dividing because they decide to follow the wrong path. I mean, you could say the same thing for Sunnis and Shias then. I mean, like, why would you want to hang out with, wouldn't you want to be brothers and sisters with the Sunnis or the Shias? Because they're also believe in the Quran, but they have these other innovations they're doing, and so that's the same thing. I mean, um, actually, if you read uh,
Surah 9.
Appendix 18, sorry, Surah 9.
No, no, we
Oh,
can mention those verses later.
okay, okay. I wanted to read Appendix 18. So it says, it's on page 437 here. It says, the Quran proclaims that the Quran is complete. Second paragraph. The Quran proclaims that the Quran is complete, perfect, and fully detailed, and that the religious regulations, and it mentions these verses, and then it says, and that the religious regulations not specifically instituted in the Quran constitute a religion other than Islam or submission. The true believers uphold the Quran, the whole Quran, and nothing but the Quran. This principle is confirmed in the Quran's mathematical code. So this shows you that they're not believers, they're hypocrites, and they're following a religion other than submission because they're not upholding the Quran alone, because they're following practices that are not specifically instituted in the Quran.
Also, Masha Allah, Salman, the way I see it also is when we start um, saying that innovations are acceptable in a way, then 20, 30 years down the line, then we are in the same boat as traditional Muslim, where anything goes.
So once down that slippery road.
Yeah, that's how I see it.
Yeah, I mean, we have to draw the line of what submission is, because otherwise everybody's a submitter. The entire world, they're following something, even Satan could be, because he's believes in God at the end, at the other extreme end. But we have to define what submission is, like what do we stand for, like what is submission? And we know from the Quran now, I mean, that's what submission is, that's the religion. So if you're going to go outside of that and follow other things, then you're on your own, basically. I mean, we shouldn't be afraid whether we are 1, 2, 3, or 4 people. I mean, it's just one of us. We have to keep the religion intact as it is, and define that boundary for the sake of the religion. Because if you say what I'm following is submission to and what you're following is submission to, then you have made it acceptable in submission to have this thing, and then later on people are going to decide those two paths, and they're all going to get jumbled up, and it's all going to spread like disease. So you have to sort of